Xbox has been under a lot of controversy recently with their price increase for Game Pass, but this is actually a problem that's been happening ever since the 360 era. And the big problem is actually with their branding. If you think of Nintendo, what do you think of? You think of their games Mario, Zelda, Pokemon. If you think of PlayStation, what do you think of? You might think of DVD players, at least for the time, that was their selling point. You might think of backwards compatibility. But the real two selling points is AAA games and affordability. And so when it comes to Xbox brand identity, what do you think of? Well, when the original Xbox came out, it was Xbox Live, or Halo, or even Morrowind. And what all these things have in common is that Xbox's whole identity was bringing a PC to a console. That's really what made Xbox what it is. Because before, if you wanted to play multiplayer, that was really something exclusive to PCs. Even something like a big 3D open world game, that was really something you'd only ever see on a PC if it was powerful enough. Xbox brought that PC experience to console gamers. And this actually forced Sony to compete with Microsoft. Because when they released the PS3, they were forced to make it compete with Xbox and offer those same features of more power that's more akin to a PC, even having multiplayer functionality. But it came at a cost of $500, where the 360 was able to cost $400, $100 cheaper. And it's because Microsoft, with their original Xbox, was already able to make a better PC console instead of PlayStation. And this also gave Xbox a head start into the new generation. And I would say this is Xbox's most memorable moment. When people think of Xbox, people are mainly thinking of the 360. Or at least that's what they remember. They remember the unique Xbox UI. They remember Halo and Halo multiplayer. They remember Call of Duty multiplayer on Xbox Live. And they remember playing Oblivion for the first time. It was undeniable that Xbox was the better console, except they had one problem: the red ring of death. And it's because bringing the PC experience to consoles came at a cost, because Xbox was really trying to push the limits of what a console could do. And the way they designed it had a hardware failure, which we already know. And while they did a very important thing, which is allow everyone who had the red ring of death to get a new Xbox free of charge, this really killed the 360's momentum. It gave PlayStation more time to catch up, make a more cheaper console, and cut some things that people didn't really care about. Now, after this major roadblock that stifled Xbox's growth, what did they do? They released the Xbox Kinect. Now, this is something PlayStation also did too with their motion control thing they made. And it's because everyone wanted to capture the Wii market. Except the thing that these companies didn't realize at the time is that despite the success of the Wii, people who owned the Wii that were casual gamers didn't actually buy that many games for the Wii. And since consoles mainly make money from selling games, it didn't really make much sense for Xbox to make the Kinect. The only thing Xbox's core audience really liked about the Kinect was the microphone. The camera didn't really make much sense for the Xbox to begin with. What Xbox could have done instead is release a microphone that was cheaper and much more accessible. And this is actually Xbox's core problem, is that they don't actually understand what gamers want. And this actually carried over with Xbox's next console, the Xbox One. Xbox's presentation for the Xbox One was notorious for mentioning TV, EA Sports, and Call of Duty. The problem with the Xbox One trying to focus so much on TV is that eventually TVs would evolve to not need a console at all. Netflix was already on the rise, and eventually TV manufacturers would figure out a way to have Netflix stream to a TV without the need of a console or a third-party device. And also during this time, EA became the most hated company in the United States. It didn't make sense for Xbox to focus so much on EA Sports when people who played games weren't big fans of them. Especially because people who would buy the next EA game knew what they're going to get already. The EA already gave up on trying to provide anything new with their sports games. And the problem with trying to focus on Call of Duty is that people bought an Xbox for Halo. That's really Xbox's identity. And what that presentation really showed is that Xbox doesn't really know what it's trying to be anymore. At least when it first came out, it was very clear. The Xbox is going to be PC for consoles. But after PlayStation provided an almost equal experience of PC to console, it wasn't really clear what Xbox's identity would be anymore. And the biggest problem with trying to appeal to casual gamers is that they're already been moving on to the iPhone. There are so many ways for people to casually play games that it doesn't make sense for someone to buy a next generation Xbox if they don't really care about games that much. And the worst part is that they bundled the Kinect with the Xbox One. And I've already went over this before, but it would have made much more sense for Xbox to include a headset that had a microphone instead of a Kinect. That's what really should have been on the box, was an Xbox headset with a microphone. And it doesn't help that Call of Duty Ghosts was a very controversial game that many people didn't like when it came out. And when Bungie didn't want to make Halo games anymore, it seems like Xbox just gave up. Especially when Bungie already released Destiny. They could have spoke with Bungie to make Destiny 2 a Halo game, especially because Microsoft has the money. All they'd have to do is throw a high enough number and they would say yes. And this actually would have been ahead of its time, especially because of the success of Fortnite in multiplayer online games. There's no reason why Destiny 2 couldn't have been a Halo game instead in the face of the Xbox One. Now, I admit this has its problems, but the point of me showing this is that in an alternate world, if Xbox actually focused on their brand identity more, they could have tried to think of something to do with Halo instead of focusing on Call of Duty. And it's also to point out that there's no reason why they should have just let Bungie go, especially when they have the money. And of course, the other big controversy was that the Xbox One would have to be online only. And this is yet another example of Xbox not understanding what players want. Because at this time, digital stores were already on the rise, and people seemed to like the convenience of online stores. But the problem was that people didn't really understand how ownership would work. This would have been the perfect time for Xbox to make it very clear that the games you buy digitally are your games. Instead, by making the Xbox One online only, it tells players that if Microsoft servers ever shut down, you lose your games. And soon after this happened, Microsoft actually stopped announcing how many Xboxes were sold. Instead, they wanted to focus on how many Xbox Live users they had instead. And it's a really bad sign when a company wants to hide numbers, because if they're hiding it, chances are it's not good. And what this really shows is the effects of Xbox's failure to actually tell people what the Xbox uniqueness is, why people should own an Xbox over anything else in the market. And so with this new focus of live users, they wanted to find other ways they can monetize this. And it didn't help that the PS4 sold about double the amount of consoles that the Xbox One did. And so with a focus on Xbox Live, they created Game Pass. This was Xbox's answer to tell people why they should own an Xbox over a PlayStation or a Nintendo. And at its core, Game Pass's identity is value. The reason why people like Game Pass so much is because it provides so much value. For only $10 a month, you have access to over 100 games. It's almost like having access to 100 games for a free trial, and you could play the full game if you like it. Now, there are two problems with this. One is that it's hard to convince people that this is the reason why you should buy an Xbox. I'm sure some people did, but also some people in the back of their heads know that eventually this deal will go away. And second, I want to point out how this is a stark contrast to how Amazon has a similar deal. Because you might be aware of Amazon Prime, and if you're wondering how they're related, both of these deals, Game Pass and Amazon Prime, focus on the idea of having a deal that's so good that you would be foolish to say no. And this worked really well for Amazon because they have almost 200 million US subscribers to Amazon Prime. And you may notice that Amazon Prime hasn't raised the prices despite so many people subscribe. It seems like they have enough subscribers. How much more are they going to get in the United States? But this works for Amazon because people that pay for Amazon Prime actually spend more money on products on Amazon's store. So they actually make their money back because people with Amazon Prime want to get value out of Amazon Prime. And because of this, it's very unlikely that Amazon Prime will raise their prices too high. Because if they do, it's going to piss off people that pay for Prime, and it's going to undo all the progress they've made. Because for Amazon, it's not worth it increasing it any more than they have to, because they lose out on all the money they make from people buying so much stuff. And why I'm pointing this out is because hopefully you could see that Game Pass has an inherent problem where while it provides great value, that you'd be foolish not to pay for it, it's not really clear how Xbox makes returns on this. And maybe you'll see where I'm going, but Game Pass also should have focused on having great deals for games that aren't on Game Pass. And the point of doing this is that the price could actually be sustainable, and it also would help to create a new identity for Xbox, which is that Xbox provides great value. It actually would have fit in really well. If Xbox was known for giving great discounts that you wouldn't get on other consoles, that would be a huge advantage for Xbox. This console generation is most known for not providing anything new. And the truth is that if people still decide to play on their PS4, Sony's happy because they're still buying games on a PlayStation, so Sony still makes money. And since more people already have a PlayStation to begin with, they don't really have to do much more to steal market share from Xbox, because they're doing it for them. And the Xbox Series X really needed to be the console that gave people a real reason why they should own it over other consoles. I will admit that the Xbox Series X goes in line with Xbox's identity of Xbox provides a PC experience for console. But this doesn't really matter anymore when the PlayStation is now capable of doing the same things. And the worst part is that the one thing that Xbox is most known for, Halo, got delayed. And it didn't help that once the game finally came out, it came with a battle pass. This is the game that's supposed to sell people on why they should own an Xbox, and you have a battle pass in the game? It really goes to show that Xbox really gave up on trying to create a core identity of why people should own an Xbox. And it doesn't help that their exclusives coming out aren't that good too. Redfall was terrible. Starfield was also terrible. And that was supposed to be the game. And when they have games that actually do well, they shut down the studio, like Hi-Fi Rush. And part of the reason why a game like Hi-Fi Rush resonated with so many people is because indie games are becoming more popular. People are getting tired of AAA games, especially games like Starfield. A game like Starfield really was the prime example of every problem players had with AAA games, especially more recently. So when they shut down all their indie studios, it just kills their brand identity even further. It doesn't help that Xbox isn't willing to take a loss on certain games that don't do as well, that are still good, to try and sell people on buying their Xbox. And then a few years back, they actually renamed Xbox Gold to Xbox Game Pass Core. And now they renamed it again Xbox Essential. Do you see how confusing it is? That if you just want to pay to play games online, you don't even know what you're supposed to buy? Game Pass Essential should just be called Xbox Live, and it should have Game Pass games as a bonus to show you why you should get Game Pass. And the reason why they're making Game Pass Ultimate more expensive isn't for no reason, it's actually because they're adding more stuff to Ultimate. Where what they really should have done is got rid of Premium and just renamed that to Ultimate. That should have kept everything people are already paying for with Game Pass, should have been the same, and it still should have been cheap. What they should have done is made a new tier, Platinum, that introduced all these new games. At least then they could have reduced the damage that was done by raising prices on Game Pass. Especially because if they want to listen to fan feedback, it would make more sense to at least introduce it and test it to see how many people choose to get the higher tier of Game Pass instead of forcing it on people. But even then, adding more games to Game Pass and making it more expensive really goes to show that Xbox doesn't even understand why people buy Game Pass in the first place. People buy Game Pass for value. The problem is that there's only so much time in the day, and there's only so many games people could play. So eventually, adding more stuff to Game Pass doesn't actually matter anymore. It only actually matters if the price stays the same, because if you add more stuff, it actually would add more value to Game Pass for the price. Because all adding more games does is make Game Pass seem more like a library similar to Netflix, where it has a large library of movies for a $20 subscription or whatever it is. If adding all this extra stuff to Game Pass forces Xbox to raise prices for Game Pass so they could still make a profit, it doesn't make sense to add all this extra stuff to Game Pass because it's not why people subscribe to Game Pass. And adding a Fortnite Crew membership really goes to show how Game Pass doesn't really understand why people are subscribing to it. Because anyone who plays games kind of sees how dumb it is that you're paying for a Game Pass subscription, which gives you access to a Fortnite subscription. And the last thing Xbox has less, which is supposed to show people why they should own an Xbox, is fading away. As in 2022, 25 million people were subscribed to Game Pass. In 2024, 34 million people were subscribed to Game Pass. And I'm sure part of that is making Xbox Gold a Game Pass membership, which just inflates the numbers. Really all that number tells you is that pretty much all the people that own an Xbox pay for an online subscription. And so the core problem with Xbox is that they don't actually understand gamers and what they want. And so I finally want to talk about what's actually going to happen to Xbox. Currently, their business model is to sell people on Xbox, have them into their ecosystem so they buy games on the Xbox store. But since there's no real value that Xbox provides anymore, it seems like they're going to really turn to software. Since they already bought Activision Blizzard and they already own all these major IPs, that they can still make games. But with the lack of hype of the next Call of Duty game, combined with the disappointment of Starfield, it really seems like that even Microsoft's games are going to be on decline too. And it's kind of funny because a few years back, people were worried about Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard because it would make them into a monopoly. But the real tragedy is that all those IPs will likely eventually fade off and die, never to see another game made for them again. And then the final question is, why do I even care to make a video like this in the first place? Why does it even matter how well Xbox is doing? Well, the reason it matters is because of competition. Xbox has really been the main competition for PlayStation. And if Xbox is gone, that's only going to leave PlayStation and Nintendo left. And given how Nintendo's already raising prices for their games, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Xbox? And thank you for watching.